Business has always been about turning a profit, making money. But can it stand for something more? Something beyond dollars and cents? We think so. We think that today, business has a higher calling, a purpose to be fair and just, to do right by their workers, customers, communities, and the environment. And it turns out companies successful doing that also do better for their bottom line. When you see the Just Capital seal, it means this company is a force for good. Visit justcapital.com to learn more.
And good afternoon. We are doing it live right here. Now weekday afternoons at 4 o'clock, we get right down to business with the news-driven hour. We're doing more in 2024, now at 4 in the afternoon. Mottek On Money, live on the air for you here on 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com. And yes, the on-demand Mottek On Money podcast at kbc.com, Apple, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Well, the stock market finishing nicely higher today for a change, recovering losses from earlier this week. It looks like optimism on AI, artificial intelligence, driving the big tech names sharply higher today, despite uncertainty about the Fed's next move, whether they'll be cutting interest rates as quickly as the market expects. Also nervous time around the world with the winds of war blowing. The U.S. military launching a fifth round of strikes on Houthi weapons in Yemen today, targeting anti-ship missiles aimed at the Red Sea. According to the Wall Street Journal, this happened hours after firing an earlier barrage as rising tensions across the region there threatened to pull more parties into a widening war. The U.S. said the strikes on the missiles hit over a dozen Houthi missiles that were about to be fired. Meanwhile, oil prices did move higher today on concerns about what's happening around the world, especially the Middle East. Pakistan conducting strikes inside Iran, targeting separatist militias there, and the country's foreign ministry announced this 2 days after Iranian strikes inside Pakistani territory. In Israel, the prime minister today rejecting U.S. calls to scale back Israel's military offensive in the Gaza Strip or take steps toward the establishment of a Palestinian state after the war, drawing an immediate scolding from the Biden White House. The Dow coming in for a closing gain of 202 points today. The S&P 500 settling higher by 42. The Nasdaq advanced 200 points. The market did claw back some of the losses we've seen earlier this week, with the big tech names powering the S&P 500 and Nasdaq to erase all of the losses we've seen so far in 2024. Shares of Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing, TSM's the ticker symbol on that one, up about 10% after it produced results that beat analyst expectations. NVIDIA moving up about 2% today. Looks like NVIDIA ended up, 3.3% to an all-time high, as a matter of fact. Meanwhile, analysts at B of A weighed in with a newly upbeat view of Apple, and that stock moved up more than 3%. They upgraded it to buy from neutral amid longer-term optimism about the iPhone business, especially the new one, the iPhone 15. Looks like we did get a new reading on the job front today, with the number of people in unemployment lines falling last week to the lowest we've seen in 16 months, indicating that layoffs remain near record lows. Looks like unemployment benefits fell to 187,000, the new claims, and the Philadelphia Fed said its gauge of regional business activity inched up to negative 10.6 in January from a negative 12.8 reading the previous month. They note any reading below zero indicates deteriorating conditions. This after a rather troublesome report on manufacturing we got earlier this week, which showed back east that New York State Empire Manufacturing Index slipped to the lowest we've seen since May of 2020, when the economy was shut down during the pandemic. And here's another tough announcement from a major retailer a day after we got the report showing holiday shopping exceeded optimistic forecasts, rising 5.6% over the previous holiday season. Today comes a report that department store chain Macy's plans to cut 2,350 jobs and close 5 stores, according to the Wall Street Journal this afternoon. The company's trying to curb expenses and meet the demands of what it said was an ever-changing consumer and marketplace. The Journal notes the cuts amount to around 13% of Macy's corporate staff and about 3.5% of its staff overall, part of an effort to shed costs, eliminate management layers, and redirect spending toward improving customer shopping experience. Maybe they'll have less people talking to themselves in the stores instead of helping the customers. The dismissals will begin on January 26th, according to a memo sent to employees cited by the publication. Among the 5 stores they've announced plans to close, by the way, another one here in Southern California, and that location is in Simi Valley. Looks like shares of Macy's are moving slightly higher in after-hours trading now after gaining about 0.5% during the trading day today. Some breaking news out of Washington. The Senate and House approving a temporary government funding extension into March, racing to prevent a partial federal government shutdown. The Senate voting 77-18 on the extension, known as a continuing resolution. The House voted 314 to 108 to approve it. That bill now goes on to the president's desk for his signature before the deadline of midnight at the end of Friday, averting a government shutdown at least until March. A group of freelance writers and editors now suing the Department of Labor, claiming the Biden administration's new rule making it more difficult for companies to treat some workers as independent contractors is illegal and should be struck down. The 4 freelance workers filed the lawsuit back east, alleging the rule unveiled last week is so vague that it violates the Constitution. This is something that's being watched nationwide. The lawsuit's the first to challenge the rule, which is scheduled to take effect in March, but more legal challenges are expected. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the largest U.S. business lobby, has said it's considering suing. Republicans in Congress have also said they will move to repeal the rule through legislation. I'll talk about that case with Wilson Freeman, attorney with the Pacific Legal Foundation, later this hour. The latest crime reports in Los Angeles include a bakery break-in the middle of the night in the Pico Union area, and food delivery driver was carjacked at gunpoint in the Mid-Wilshire area this week. Overnight RV parking, meanwhile, has been banned in some west side areas of Los Angeles after years of complaints by businesses and residents. I'll discuss all that and more tonight with the Honorable Dennis ZINE, former Los Angeles City Council member, former LAPD sergeant, and current reserve officer with about 55 years of service to the City of Angels. Dennis ZINE will be joining me live later this hour. But first, on your money, the markets, the economy, and the whole works tonight. Joining us live now is investment expert Jonathan HOENIG, Fox News contributor, portfolio manager at Capitalist Pig Hedge Fund, and author of the book Price is Primary, How to Profit with Any Asset in Any Market at Any Time. And his latest book, by the way, is Can You Really Love a Dog? Leonard Peikoff and Anne Rand on Pets. I know Jonathan HOENIG loves dogs and cats, and on Wall Street loves bulls, bears, not so much. Animal spirits returning to the markets. Here he is, Jonathan HOENIG. Good afternoon, sir.
Oh, great, Frank. Thank you for having me once again. And look, there's a lot to be optimistic about this year, but it's a long year, and I think we're going to see tremendous volatility. Just look at interest rates. I mean, the last 6 months, the 10-year yield has gone from 3.9% all the way up to 5%, then back down to 3.9%, and now some are saying, Frank, back up to perhaps 5% again. So, look, the market's going to keep us guessing, and there's going to be plenty of volatility. I don't think it's a time to be tremendously short. I think there are opportunities, but I think now more than ever, you really got to try to take that long-term perspective, Frank, especially with unrest in the Middle East. And we talk about the dollars and cents. It's we've got American lives and Western lives on the line in the Middle East. So our thoughts are with all those people who are fighting to keep at least America and the West free. But in the interim, it could cause a lot of rockiness on Wall Street and in the economy overall.
Certainly, Godspeed to all of our troops in harm's way at the moment, and indeed under attack in many places. And they're having that big meeting in Davos now. The captains of the financial world, Jamie Dimon and others. Today, Stephen Schwartzman made some comments, the head of Blackstone. He said animal spirits are returning to the market and believes 2024 will be a good year. But as you noted, uncertainty over the Fed's next move very much front and center. The economy appears to be slowing a bit as rates still remain at 20-plus year highs here. Consumer credit card rates at all-time highs. What about recession talk? We started last year with the expectation that there would definitely be a recession last year, which didn't happen. What about this year, Jonathan?
Well, what powers the economy forward, Frank, is not consumption, as most people say. Consumer spending drives the economy. It's actually consumer and investor. It's investment that drives the economy. It's the new business creation. I mean, as you mentioned, even look at NVIDIA. I mean, this stock was $500 a month ago. It's $570 today because it is on the cutting edge. So what worries me is the prospect of new investment more than anything, Frank, because of the debt that's out there. I mean, look, there's no such thing as a free lunch. And as you said, it was a strong holiday season, but, the American spent much more than had been expected. Economists expected on the order of $9 billion increase in terms of consumer spending. It was $23 billion. So the American consumer is tapped out, and even the American government, Frank, is tapped out. I mean, interest on the national debt now is up 39% year over year. I mean, can you imagine if your bills went up 40% all of a sudden out of nowhere with no commensurate increase in income? So I think that this is the year the piper gets paid, and I'm not a Cassandra, but I think it's very likely that you'll actually get the recession we expected in 2023 at some time here in 2024.
All right. It looks the usually boring bond market. Again, you got the bouncing ball going on here. You're right. The yield in the 10-year note is back up to 4.15%, and that's the one that impacts the fixed-rate mortgage rates, which had been coming down as we wrapped up last year and early into this year. But looks like mortgage rates are set to pick up again. What about your expectation? You mentioned the possibility of another 5% rating on that important 10-year note yield. Where do you see those rates go from here?
Well, I mean, the market's forward-looking, Frank, and that's the irony is now that everyone has accepted the fact that rate cuts are imminent and rate cuts are certainty, now the market is looking further ahead. And, if we look back and look at history a little bit, in the mid-1970s, 1975, 1976, they really thought that they had inflation licked, much as if seemingly many in Washington think that they have inflation licked today. And, of course, it was another 3 or 4 years at least until inflation came down and interest rates went from 10% down to 5%, and then the later part of the 70s back up to 10 and even higher. So, in terms of where to put your money in bonds, I think you've got to keep it very short. BIL, B-I-L, that's an ETF that we own over at CapitalSpig.com, and this is about as safe as you can get, Frank, when it comes to bond investments. It's a very short-term U.S. government bond, so it's not going to be susceptible to rising interest rates. And, I fear rates are headed up higher once again in the months to come, so I think you've got to really keep it high quality and keep it short-term.
All right. Do you think the Fed will be more focused on controlling inflation or heading off a recession here as we proceed into 2024?
Well, they always say it's data dependent, Frank, but I think it's market dependent more than anything. I mean, the biggest thing that bond bulls have, that is people who are expecting and hoping for lower interest rates, are a lot of indications of a slowing economy. One you mentioned is employment, which is starting to roll over. Another two sections of the market that I'm watching, Frank. I mean, we're looking at Chevron, ExxonMobil, all the big energy stocks at 52-week lows. At the same time, every Chinese-oriented stock and investment is at 52-week lows. That's often been commensurate with a slowing economy overall. So the tea leaves are pretty mixed now. But, I think in general, it's a time to anticipate overall that the growth that we saw in 2023 is likely to taper off in 2024, even when it comes to the market. There's places to make money, but I think it's not going to be a relentless bull as it was last year.
All right, interesting.
Afford Anything is not a podcast that tells you what to do. Afford Anything is a podcast that teaches you how to be better at thinking for yourself.
Former NASA astronaut Mike Massimino.
I don't know what the stereotypical astronaut is. They're just regular people who don't give up, don't let failure stop them, and surround themselves with a good team. These are qualities I think that are important for success for anyone.
Make smarter choices and build a better life.
Afford Anything, wherever you listen.
What companies deserve your hard-earned dollar? Which would you want to work for? How can you know if they share your values? Just ask us. Just Capital is a nonprofit that tracks who really means business in supporting workers, customers, communities, the environment, and shareholders. We measure progress, track success, and help them be better. When you see the Just Capital seal, you know what's real, because just business is better business. Visit justcapital.com to learn who makes your dollar count.
The oil names you mentioned, let's talk more about that. What do you think of ExxonMobil and some of the other big oil names here with all the tensions happening around the world?
Well, I had been a real commodities bull in general, Frank, but a lot of them are weakening quite a bit. I mean, oil, even silver, platinum, and palladium. Platinum's down something like 15% in just a month. Palladium even more than that. at DBC, which is the big commodities ETF. Here's the way I'm actually playing, let's just say, some of the unrest in the Middle East, and playing that theme is BOAT, B-O-A-T. This is an ETF that actually tracks shipping stocks. Shipping rates have gone up given a lot of the uncertainty. So BOAT is a pretty unusual name. And it's breaking out on the charts, and it also pays about a 12% annualized dividend. So you always want to consult a financial advisor, do your own due diligence. But this is one that's not correlated with the Mag 7, but I think it could do well even if the rest of the market flutters. That's BOAT, B-O-A-T.
All right. And what about China at this point? Are you touching anything China-related, given all of the China news lately?
It's a great example, Frank, of how, dictatorship doesn't make a good economy. And the more authoritarian China has become, basically even before COVID, before the pandemic, but certainly during and after, the more the lockdowns they had, the more central planning they have. You have all that government make-work cities that have been built now being demolished, and tremendous debt and mismanagement coming in through in China through all their central planning. So it's been fascinating. This was the economy, Frank, that people keep telling us is going to overtake us. Many of these Chinese stocks are back where they were 15, 18 years ago. So I don't see any bottom in any of those Chinese names. And, as we always say, the trend tends to persist. And nearly all of them, FXI is the kind of the benchmark you watch over there. FXI, that's like the Dow Jones of China. New 52-week low, even as our own market flies. So it's a great lesson that if you want to be prosperous, you have to stay free.
I suspect you did not have a Tesla plugged in, frozen there, and we're sitting there for hours trying to get it charged in this latest snowstorm back east. But looks like the EV makers, including Tesla, have come under pressure lately, given the cold weather news we've seen lately, and also Hertz unloading a lot of its Teslas at the moment. What about Tesla and the other EV companies?
I take the personality out of it, Frank. Elon Musk is a personality. This is a business in which margins are simply likely to compress. Tesla's slashing prices all throughout China. And there was a time when Tesla was the, not just technology company, but the EV company. This was like kind of a one-stop shop. It reminded me very much in the early internet days, 95, 96, 97. There was literally just a handful of, quote, internet companies. Now, of course, every company is an internet company, and you've seen those margins come in quite a bit. So Tesla, I think, is an innovative company, but the stock really looks pretty broken. And IBM, for example, is a much stronger technology stock, a much stronger name than Tesla. And I think what you're pointing out, Frank, of the troubles, the real-world troubles with many EVs is just kind of emblematic of the real-world troubles with investing in this industry. And I think a weak stock says stay away. So I really want to avoid Tesla right now. Elon's got bills to pay with Twitter, and the stock's under pressure for that reason.
All right, looks like Apple getting a boost today on an upgrade. What about Apple here? Looks like it moved up nearly $6 today, back to just shy of $189.
Yeah, Apple, it's like they used to say about General Motors, Frank. As goes Apple, so goes the nation. Microsoft briefly has taken over the tune as the world's largest company, the largest company, I should say, in the S&P 500. But Apple's right there behind it. And look, it's up 40% in just the last year. So some semblance of back and fill is due. Stocks simply don't go up year after year after year in perpetuity. But, for Apple to stay on top, it's going to have to stay innovative. It's going to have to stay competitive. And, even something like Tesla or Apple, Frank, reminds me, look, it was in the mid-1990s when Motorola was one of the top tech stocks. People probably don't even remember that name anymore, but Motorola was behind what technology? Cellular phones, wireless phones. So, if these companies don't continue to innovate, today's Tesla could end up like tomorrow's Motorola. But Apple, I don't think you fight the tape, but I think in terms of putting new money to work, the easy money has been made on Apple. So I think there's better places to put new money to work, but certainly don't fight the tape on a great American company.
Terrific. Well, Jonathan, thank you very much for taking the call. Hope to see you out here in Los Angeles. We'll have a book signing for you out here, your latest book, Can You Really Love a Dog? It's a beautiful book, and hopefully you're getting a great response on it.
Oh, thank you so much, Frank. Appreciate it, and I'll be listening for all your insights.
Thank you very much. Likewise, we'll be looking for you on Fox News and Fox Business. That is Jonathan HOENIG, Fox News contributor, portfolio manager at Capitalist Pig Hedge Fund, and author of the book Price is Primary, How to Profit with Any Asset in Any Market at Any Time. And the latest book, Can You Really Love a Dog? Jonathan, thanks again for joining us live here this afternoon. It's time to start the new year off right with reminders from attorney Clark Fielding of Fielding Law. Now, if you've been hurt in an accident that was not your fault, it's easy to feel lost in the sea of legal complexities. Fear not. Clark and his team of law sharks are here to navigate the legal waters for you. They have the expertise to tackle any case, big or small. Fielding Law, not just about providing legal advice, they're also about making sure you understand every step of the process. So consider them your partners in justice. Whether you're facing a sea of paperwork, swimming in contractual confusion, or caught in a legal undertow, Clark the Shark is the lifeguard you need. The Fielding Law team is dedicated to protecting your rights and ensuring a smooth journey through the legal currents. So as you dive into the new year, remember Fielding Law always has your back. They're not just lawyers, they're your fantastic friends in the legal world. Call them now, 833-88-SHARK. The number again, 833-88-SHARK, or go to clarkthesharklaw.com. Again, that's clarkthesharklaw.com. 790 KBC welcomes, you guessed it, Engelbert Humperdinck coming to the Saban Theater February 10th. Tickets on sale now at AXS.com. Right now, caller 9 wins at 1-888-790-5222. There he is. If you're caller 9, you can get a pair of tickets to the show and hear him for yourself. Engelbert Humperdinck at the Saban Theater February 10th. Caller 9 wins 1-888-790-5222. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. A winning day for the stock market. The Dow closing higher by 202 points at 37,469. The S&P 500 at 42 at 4,781. And the NASDAQ gained 200 at 15,056. The tech names roaring back to life, including Apple, up, nearly $6 today at 188 and change. The yield in the 10-year note also ticking higher again to 4.15%. That's the one you know by now impacts the fixed-rate mortgage rates, which are moving higher again this week. Looks like the cryptos got a bit of a lift here now with the Bitcoin up about $200 back to 41,313. Bitcoin has pulled back since the SEC approved those Bitcoin ETFs last week. Ethereum up $13 at 2,467 and Doge at 8 cents. We see gold at $4.50 now at $2,026.10 an ounce. Crude oil after hours now down 8 cents at $74 a barrel after getting a bump higher on the latest tensions in the Middle East. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. Good afternoon. We're doing more in 2024 at 4 in the afternoon. We don't keep our listeners in the dark. We started an hour earlier now as of 2024 in the 4 o'clock hour. So welcome to the 4 o'clock hour. It's Mottek On Money, followed by the 790 KBC News Blitz at 5 with our Legal Eagle Royal Oaks. He'll be coming up at 5 o'clock. Well, a group of freelance writers and editors now suing the U.S. Department of Labor, claiming the Biden administration's new rule making it more difficult for companies to treat some workers as independent contractors is illegal and should be struck down. This is a case that's getting nationwide attention. It was actually filed back east by 4 freelance workers. They filed a lawsuit in Georgia federal court this week, alleging that the rule unveiled last week is so vague that it violates the U.S. Constitution. The lawsuit is the first to challenge the rule, which is scheduled to take effect on March 11th, but more legal challenges are expected. And the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the largest U.S. business lobby, has said it's considering suing. Republicans in Congress have also said they will move to repeal the rule through legislation. I believe we have our guest on the line here now. All right, terrific. Well, let's bring in Wilson Freeman now, attorney with the Pacific Legal Foundation, who's following this case very closely. Wilson, thank you very much. Happy New Year to you, our first conversation here in 2024.
Yes, Happy New Year to you as well. Thank you very much for having me on.
Well, fantastic on this big story here. Now, this is the freelancers I see here in their lawsuit said the department failed to explain why it was abandoning a simpler Trump-era rule that was favored by business groups. Give us an update on this important case that's getting attention here as well as across the country.
Sure thing. Just to be clear, these are my clients. This is my case. We brought this case in Georgia, as you noted, on behalf of 4 freelance writers to challenge this Biden administration rule. The rule reverses course from a Trump-era rule, which had made it much easier to tell who's an independent contractor under federal law. Now, obviously in California out there, you have AB 5, which makes it very difficult to be an independent contractor. But around the rest of the country, the Fair Labor Standards Act governs who's an independent contractor under federal law and who's an employee. And the federal government, as I noted under Trump in 2021, made it a lot easier to tell who was an independent contractor and made it a lot simpler for freelancers like my clients to work as freelancers. Now, the Biden administration tightening the screws on these freelancers and making it just much more
How wrestling really works and how you get the ratings. Eric Bischoff and Conrad Thompson explain on 83 Weeks.
I mean, I dig Jey Uso because he's born out of great storytelling and he lived up to the opportunity and exceeded it. The LA Knight, he's way up on my list because here's a guy that's been around for almost ever, should have probably quit a half a dozen times, and he just forced his way into their life. And now he's making money hand over fist. That is a story I love.
83 Weeks on YouTube or wherever you listen.
Business has always been about turning a profit, making money. But can it stand for something more? Something beyond dollars and cents? We think so. We think that today, business has a higher calling, a purpose to be fair and just, to do right by their workers, customers, communities, and the environment. And it turns out companies successful doing that also do better for their bottom line. When you see the Just Capital seal, it means this company is a force for good. Visit justcapital.com to learn more.
difficult to do business the way they want to, and threatening enforcement and threatening the jobs of millions of freelancers nationwide with this rule.
All right. So where do things stand here now? And thank you very much for coming to the line here. You are the one who filed this lawsuit, and so it's great to be able to ask you directly about this. What's the next step in this process here?
Well, so we filed the case in Georgia. At this point, we're waiting on the government to respond to our filing. The time frames with litigation can be a little finicky, so we'll just have to wait and see what they do. The rule right now, it was promulgated on the first week of January, I believe. It won't go into effect until March. So right now, and for the past few years, everyone is still laboring under the standard that existed that the Trump administration put out in 21. This will change that standard, but it's not in effect quite yet.
So what the Biden administration is proposing here with this rule is widely expected to increase labor costs for businesses, right? And that's why the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is also considering suing on this matter.
Definitely. I mean, the purpose of the rule is to make it harder to identify as an independent contractor in contrast with the 2021 rule. It's meant to tighten the screws on these individuals who want to be freelancers by just making it more dangerous for businesses to hire them because businesses know that the Fair Labor Standards Act involves potentially criminal penalties, lawsuits, and damages. Businesses don't want to get involved unless they can be sure that the freelance arrangement they've entered into is bona fide and won't get them on the hook or in trouble with the Department of Labor later down the road. So that the purpose of this rule is to scare businesses, is to put the fear of God into them and know that when they're hiring freelancers, they're taking a risk.
Well, we're certainly used to business-unfriendly policies here in California. So is the Biden administration taking a page out of what's happening here?
Definitely. I mean, I think, there are pains in their rule to try and say what they're not doing, what they did in California. But I think in some ways it's worse because in California, businesses know the rules. They know it's very hard to hire independent contractors unless they fit into one of AB 5's very narrow exceptions. But the Department of Labor, they've created a standard where nobody knows what the rules are. And the Department of Labor says they can't tell you what the rules are. And that sort of standard just creates a nightmare situation for anybody who wants to work with an independent contractor.
All right, and so far you've not received a satisfactory explanation as to why the Biden administration is abandoning what had been in place under President Trump, right? That was favored by business groups. Maybe you can enlighten us. What was his rule, and what do they want to go to?
Well, sure. So under the law, the government, in order to determine who's an independent contractor, they've typically employed a multi-factor balancing test. So, it's a complicated sort of weighing procedure. In 2021, the Trump administration put out a rule to the end of that administration, which tried to simplify this a little bit and say, if you control the way that you work and you have a possible opportunity for profit, depending on how you do the job, you're probably an independent contractor. And that was a much simpler sort of two core factor test, which could help people set up their business arrangement and know whether or not they're independent contractors. But in this latest rule, the Department of Labor has said we can't have this simplified two-factor test. That makes it too easy to be an independent contractor, and the Department of Labor doesn't really give a good reason for this. They just say that this is what the law requires. This is the only way to be consistent with their view of what the Fair Labor Standards Act needs. So instead of this simpler two core factor test, the Department of Labor has now this 7-factor or 6-factor balancing test where no one factor can be given any additional significance. As I said, it creates a nightmare situation. If you have, a business where you're a freelancer, you're trying to figure out whether or not you continue to be a freelancer after the rule has come down. You're going to look at this test and you're not going to be. There's no way for you to be sure, and that's the way the Department of Labor likes it. They want you to be extremely unsure, and they want that risk premium to keep people from identifying as independent contractors. That's what the big threat is to my client's business. My clients, you mentioned at the outset, they're freelance writers, and they've been working as freelance writers for years. But unfortunately, their customers are afraid that if they continue to work with them, it could expose them to legal liability. So, it creates an existential threat to their business.
Very important case. Thank you very much for thoroughly explaining it to us, which, again, is getting nationwide attention. Wilson Freeman, attorney with the Pacific Legal Foundation, will continue to are you on Twitter, by the way, so we can follow the progress of the case?
Yeah, you should check out my firm's Twitter account. We're Pacific Legal. You go to our website, pacificlegal.org. I think just on Twitter, we're just Pacific Legal, or X, I guess. Right,
we got it. All right, Wilson, thank you very much for taking the call. We wish you all the best, and Happy New Year. Thank you very much for joining us live here this afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
That's Wilson Freeman, attorney with the Pacific Legal Foundation. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. Good afternoon. We're doing it live in the 4 o'clock hour now here in 790 KBC. Mottek On Money. Weekday afternoons at 4 o'clock, followed by Royal Oaks and the 790 KBC News Blitz. Crime and homelessness, of course, big issues impacting everyone here. And the latest crime reports in L.A. include a bakery break-in the middle of the night in the Pico Union area. A food delivery driver carjacked at gunpoint in the Mid-Wilshire area this week. Overnight RV parking, meanwhile, has been banned now in some west side areas of the city after years of complaints by businesses and residents. Let's bring in the Honorable Dennis ZINE now, former L.A. City Council member, former LAPD sergeant, and current reserve officer with the LAPD with about 55 years of service to the City of Angels. Dennis ZINE, thank you very much for taking the call here this afternoon.
Pleasure to be with you, Frank.
Thank you very, very much. With crime and the big issue here, let's talk about that. I notice also the L.A. County DA's race is heating up. The field of candidates seems to be growing, and there are going to be some important forums coming up on all that. Give us your assessment of things here at the moment.
Well, Frank, crime continues in Los Angeles County. The district attorney fails to do the job of aggressive action toward the criminal element of our society that's preying on the honorable citizens of the city, county of Los Angeles. Law enforcement is understaffed, not only in the uniformed officers, but the detective personnel, the support personnel, the dispatchers, the 911 dispatchers. All along the path, we find that it's not a very positive situation when it comes to the deployment of officers due to lack of numbers. That's not only LAPD, but the Sheriff's Department, the California Highway Patrol. Law enforcement doesn't seem to be attracting qualified candidates. And then in addition to that, we have a district attorney that simply does not do the job that the district attorney, the prosecutor, the criminal element should be doing. So you combine it all together, and what you have is escalating crime problems in the city of the Angels and the county of Los Angeles.
Under this DA, is there any sign that he's reversed some of the policies that he's drawn fire for, this revolving door policy out there?
Interesting question, Frank. Not only has he not reversed his philosophy of letting the criminals run loose, but he brought a person into his office that is totally opposed to the law enforcement operations, totally opposed to the incarceration of people, totally opposed to what law enforcement stands for: peace, freedom, tranquility in communities. So he's just going down that same path that aids the criminal element and destroys communities one by one. And we find the departure of good, honorable people, taxpayers, that are done with Los Angeles City, County, and moving to other regions. That's their escape, to get away. But Gascon and his administration has done nothing, absolutely nothing, to help stem the tide of violence, the tide of crime within this region of Los Angeles County.
You probably saw that video of that hero L.A. County Sheriff's deputy who happened to have went back to a 7-Eleven. He promised he would do that to check out, to make sure that they were okay, and came into a robbery in progress. And do we know what happened to those guys, for example?
Well, we know they were arrested. It determines what's going to happen. I haven't followed through with what charges are going to be filed. But clearly, that lone deputy with about 10 years on the job, Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, came into that 7-Eleven, saw the individuals robbing the establishment, and I saw the video, and he picked up that mic that he has attached to his uniform, and I'm sure he called for help, and the cavalry arrived, and fortunately, people got arrested, and there's no one injured. But then it goes to the prosecution, and Gascon may find, well, this doesn't really warrant a felony prosecution. Well, maybe their criminal record's not serious enough to warrant a criminal prosecution, that maybe we'll give them probation. We know that the propositions that let people out without going to be booked, they sign a citation, appear in court, and oftentimes they fail to appear in court, so they get a warrant for their arrest. I mean, basically, it's like a crumbling environment. And when I talk about crumbling, it's crumbling from the bottom, from the top, and everywhere in between. So what I find people asking me continuously is, how do I get a concealed weapons permit? Where do I go to buy a gun, and where do I get a concealed weapons permit? Because people are generally afraid and concerned, and rightfully so, they should be, because we don't see the system working to make them safe, to make their families safe, to make them safe when they're walking down the street or driving back and forth to work. So the population is understanding they need to do something to protect themselves, because society, law enforcement's not really equipped to do that with the resources that they have, or the district attorney that turns his back on the criminal element and says, well, it's okay, no big deal, we'll let this go by.
Just awful. And those reports this week, somebody carjacked at gunpoint, food delivery driver had his car stolen at gunpoint in the Mid-Wilshire area. And then they had another business smashed in a bakery in the Pico Union area. So, and the list goes on.
Well, this is widespread. This goes from the San Fernando Valley to the inner city. This is widespread. It's not just certain parts of L.A. City or L.A. County. This is region, within the region of Southern California, and particularly Los Angeles County, where we find that law enforcement doesn't have the resources and the district attorney doesn't really help. Now you go to Orange County, a total different attitude, a total different prosecution. You find that the district attorney in Orange County is very aggressive with prosecuting, unlike the district attorney Gascon in Los Angeles County. So Todd Spitzer in Orange County does a wonderful job, and he absolutely seeks the maximum incarceration that he can on criminal violations when people are convicted. Just the opposite in Los Angeles County. So Gascon has really single-handedly destroyed public safety in this region of Southern California. Very, very sad. And hopefully the voters learn from this. They vote him out of office, because he's up for re-election in March. Vote him out of office and get somebody in there who's going to do the job of protecting and serving the people and their families. Plain and simple. Businesses, people, law-abiding people need to be protected by not only law enforcement, by prosecution when those criminals are apprehended by law enforcement.
The Honorable Dennis Zine, as always, wish we had more time here, Dennis, but we'll have to stop there. Thanks again for covering all the bases here as much as possible. The Honorable Dennis Zine, former Los Angeles City Council member, former LAPD sergeant, current reserve police officer with about 55 years of service to the City of Angels. You, sir, are an angel in the City of Angels. We do appreciate it, Dennis Zine. Thank you very much for taking the call here this afternoon.
You're welcome, Frank. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we have a winning day on Wall Street, something to celebrate here today. The Dow up 202 points, the S&P 500 up 42, and the NASDAQ up 200. Looks like the major averages have pretty much erased this year's losses so far with a nice rebound today. Bitcoin right now hovering just above 41,000. Gold at 2,026 an ounce. This is Mottek On Money. Stay tuned now for the 790 KBC News Blitz.
Get an inside look at Hollywood with Michael Rosenbaum.
Let's get inside of Jennifer Love Hewitt.
It's dangerous, I think, to say to women, you can't look like you're not 22 to me anymore because I don't know how to take that. Okay, well, that's your problem because I'm 44. This is what I look like. By the way, she was a looker. Like, congratulations to that 23 or 25.
But I'm a different person now.
You know?
Inside of You with Michael Rosenbaum. Wherever you listen.